Welcome, EasyMed Nation. So today we have a new episode of the Medical Device Made Easy podcast. And instead of talking about regulation and standards, I invited somebody to explain us some new technologies. As I mentioned on a previous podcast on MedTech Future for 2019, I mentioned one of the items, which is blockchain. And today I wanted to have somebody to explain to you what is exactly blockchain so that you can really understand it and not be afraid of this word and not say what's exactly that. And also be able at the end to know if how you can regulate this technology or what are exactly the possibilities of this technology in the future. So I have invited for that Khuram Malik, and he will explain us everything. So Khuram, say hello to everybody.
Hi, everyone.
So Khuram, just for all the audience to know you better, so can you introduce yourself and then we can go on the rest of the questions?
Yeah, I'm a business strategist, so that normally incorporates a number of things. Normally, if any business that wants to get 10 times bigger than they are already, my job is to help them get all their ducks in a row. So the operations, the strategy, the finance, and then that usually requires investment to help them scale further. So I then help them get the investment and help them scale the business. But in terms of what we're doing today, the other aspect of that, what is important is obviously that when you're working on business strategy, it's important to understand what the market landscape looks like. And that in this day and age, obviously, technology is really important. And blockchain is something that's kind of melding technology with business. So my job is usually to explain to the leaders of organizations what blockchain means to them. In terms of what's relevant to what we're speaking today.
Great. So, can we say you are an expert in blockchain?
I don't think that would be entirely honest. If we were to say I don't think anybody is a real expert on blockchain. It's too new. But you could say that I'm an expert in explaining to companies what blockchain is and how it might be able to help them in terms of their business model or where they want to go, in the next 5 to 10 years. So you could say that. But I'd be wary of anybody that said they were an expert on blockchain right now.
Yeah, it's true. When a new technology arrives, it's a bit difficult to know everything. Everybody is an expert then. Everybody can be an expert on the new technology.
Exactly.
Because everybody knows about it, if I can say. Okay, what else about you? So where are you living now?
I'm in London, UK.
Okay.
I've been doing business strategy now for about 5 years. I had my own IT company about 10, 15 years, well, it was about 20 years ago now.
Okay.
And that was a computer company. It was at the height of the .com boom. So I had that. I've run a couple of other IT companies since, but I decided to go into consulting. I've helped a lot of startups around the globe. I'm also an author as well. So I did write a book, which was for a faith-based community. I'm a huge evangelist for entrepreneurship. I'm not an expert on the medical device industry. I have to be honest about that. But I have to work with multiple industries, so food, restaurants, catering, fashion. My job is just to really help any industry. Just go into a business and help any industry, just help them understand the landscape that they're in or the technological challenges and stuff.
Yeah, and when we talked on the pre-talk to prepare this podcast. We mentioned that I knew that you are not an expert on medical devices, but there was not a lot of expert on medical devices that were, I can say, coming to explain about blockchain. But you were also preparing some kind of example that we can do for medical devices. So it's something that we can really look at practical examples where blockchain can help medical devices. Okay, just a question that I'm asking usually people. So just to see what are your mentality or what exactly you are doing on your free time. So which book are you recommending people to read?
I would I've actually can I mention two? Is that okay?
You can.
So the one that a business or a work related book is Essential Drucker by Peter Drucker, who's this management scholar that sadly passed away a few years ago. I have found that book is still incredibly relevant today, maybe more relevant than when it was written. It was written in the 50s.
Okay.
It was written for the 50s, but I'm finding that exceedingly relevant even today, whether you're an employee, a business leader, a manager, whatever position you have in an organization, I think you'll find that book very, very relevant.
So it's mainly for management, for leadership. This is that?
It is mainly for management and leadership, but I think even if you are in only an employee position, I think you'll find it still very useful. I think so anyway.
Okay.
So that's where career or work is concerned. In terms of in the personal life, I have to admit, I'm not somebody that I've not read fiction for 25 years.
Okay.
I don't like novels. I don't like anything that is even remotely romantic. But somebody gave me 40 Rules of Love, and it actually blew my mind. I couldn't put it down. It's actually genuinely very, very interesting. I genuinely couldn't put it down. I thought it was going to be this really mushy, chicky flicky type of book that's not going to be of any interest to me, but it really drew me in. It was a really powerful book.
You remember the author of the book, or?
Yeah, Elif Shafak. So that's Elif. She's done a TED Talk as well. Okay. But the book is phenomenal.
I'll put both books on the show notes. Then yeah, people will choose if they want to read it or not. If they will see the summary, if it's interesting for them. So great. Okay, so thank you, Khuram. Okay, so let's move now to the meat of the episode and talk specifically about blockchain. Tell us, what is blockchain? Like we are a 10-year-old child. So if you can do that.
Okay, so the blockchain, I mean, it is, as the name suggests, it's a series of blocks that are put together in a chain. But what that blockchain, those blocks that come together in a chain are doing is they're serving as a database. So where you would normally have a database inside an office, or you would have a database, databases generally don't run on a laptop on its own, but it's multiple databases coming together in a chain. And where databases are normally private, this thing is public. It's out. This is a database that's out in the public.
So when we are talking about database, it's like a server where information are stored. Is it that?
It's a place where information is stored. It's a place where data is stored. So it's a base for data, basically, as the name suggests. But what the blockchain is doing, databases are normally inside an organization and are operating, behind closed doors or privately, or there's only an interaction that's taking place between the database and the consumer. But a blockchain makes that whole process more public. It's like the difference between having your own driveway in a house to having a highway which everybody uses, like a central highway. Everybody gets on the highway, right? So you have a private road and then you have a highway, like everybody's on the highway together. Yeah. And then you have multiple stops. You have like service stations and you have petrol stations and you have, so they're the individual blocks. Or you have junctions where you get off, and so people kind of navigate that kind of chain. So it's a series of blocks on a chain. And there's a few unique things about blockchains. On the blockchain, generally speaking, when you put data onto a blockchain, it never gets deleted. So it always records every transaction that takes place or every activity that takes place. It's always available in the public domain. It's all recorded, so nothing ever gets deleted. So you have a log, you could say, a transactional log of every activity that took place, or everything that happened. So this piece of data that was created, then this happened, then this person joined.
It's like a journal. It's a journal, really.
It's a journal, yeah. I mean, the more accurate term is actually ledger. So it's a ledger. It's a public ledger of a series of events that are taking place. And those events that are being recorded can be defined by the blockchain provider.
Okay, but what is exactly the difference between a normal database and this blockchain that's in public, if I can say? Because we have also some databases that are in public, but it's not a blockchain. So what is a point of difference between them?
They have the blockchain has a series of rules. Like the data is encrypted. It's like this thing that I said about the transactional history. It's not designed to be. I mean, you can get blockchains that are centrally controlled, but the emphasis is almost always on decentralization. So where a database is normally controlled by a single private entity, and they're in control of what happens to that data and what's going on with that, the blockchain is kind of designed to be this public database that everybody's interacting with, and everybody kind of is partaking in it, if that makes more sense.
Yeah. So as you said, in normal database, we have one person owning that. In blockchain, we have many places, if I can say, where we have this information stored. So the idea is mainly, if I understand well, that we are storing the information, but not at one place. As you mentioned, it's decentralized, so it's stored at many places. is it the same information stored at many places, or is it a bit of the information stored, distributed on many places?
So, I mean, it differs between, because there are different actual blockchain providers, you could say, that are out there, just like you have different internet service providers. So they all have their own kind of parameters that they've set for the blockchains. But generally speaking, what will happen is the blockchain provider will create a set of parameters and say, okay, we're going to record identity information. We might record the picture. In this instance, if it's healthcare, for example, they might record medical information, your patient record, if you have an ID of some sort, and every time there is an event that links to you, and you might consider an event to be some sort of healthcare transaction, whether you go to a doctor, whether you buy some medicine, whether you receive some medicine, whether you consume medicine when you get medicine delivered, all of those would be considered. You could create parameters for all of those. Then what happens is, as you get other people that come onto the blockchain, you then have interactions that take place around those pieces of data. So you can then, for example, if you're the doctor and I'm a consumer, because this blockchain is recording some of that information that I've said, then when I interact with you on a medical blockchain, for example, then a third person, John Doe, for example, he can see that I came to you for a consultation, and then you gave me XYZ medication. And I'm now taking that medication, and I had this XYZ health issue, and now I'm at this state with that. So all of that information is publicly available to see. So you can observe in real time what's going on.
But when you are saying publicly available, just to not confuse people, so who can see that? Because if people can see my personal information, that I went to a doctor, that I've done this and that, there is a risk that, for me, privacy will be altered. So can you explain more that?
Yeah, so this is what's actually really the people that are starting to understand what blockchain can do. This is what a blockchain can do. This is the biggest worry that people have, and this is probably going to be the greatest thing that's going to limit the adoption. Is the worry about Big Brother? It's the worry about having data being stored somewhere. Because we've had so many data scandals. Facebook and all these other companies. So there's this worry about data, but where blockchain is attempting to address that, the first thing is that all data in the blockchain has to be encrypted. That's the number one thing. So databases a lot of databases are encrypted, but the blockchain has to be encrypted. That's the very first thing. There is the structure of the blockchain is such that the interactions that are taking place, the security comes first. So just in terms of the integrity of the data, the first thing is the encryption and making sure that no one entity or no one party can really affect the data of another, right? So it's being built in that way. So that's why you have these blocks and they work in a very particular way. But in terms of the privacy that you're talking about, if I'm on the blockchain, I might expose all of my data to the blockchain in terms of all my medical history and everything. But in terms of the transaction in terms of what the people can see in the public, there are parameters that are set by the blockchain. So only certain elements are exposed to the public. So in this example that I gave, for example, the only thing that the public might see is that a person went to visit this particular doctor and they were given some medication and they had a health issue, and that health issue is now improving. So it might not expose all of that information. So it's like, for example, on Facebook, I can put all my information on Facebook, and I can put all my photos on there, but I can choose how much of that information I choose to expose to everybody, like all my photos or some of my photos. So it kind of works in that way. And those parameters are dependent on the applications that are sitting on top of so you can get people that create applications that sit on top of the blockchain. And then what they do is interact with those blocks and interact with that data to then provide you a service.
So we have a database that contains a lot of information that are encrypted. They are built inside blocks, if I can say, that are one after the other. So it means that there is also a sequence. This one is linked to the third one, is linked to the fourth one. So it's like there is, as you mentioned, there is a journal. So there is a sequence of all the information that are done or actions that are executed. And you are saying that, okay, we have this database, it's encrypted, and then it's mainly the service provider, like you said, Facebook or things that are authorizing some information to be shown or not.
Well, the blockchain is authorizing. The blockchain is authorizing the blockchain itself is taking the responsibility for the authorization, but you have apps that interact with the blockchain to provide a service of some sort. There's a little bit like the App Store on like the Apple App Store. You have your information that you have in your phone. You have your user ID and you have your password and you have all these things. That's inside the phone. But the people that develop the apps on the phone, they use the information that's on your phone to be able to provide you a service through the app. So, that the app does something for you, the Facebook app or the FaceTime app, all these apps. So what the App Store is doing in this particular example is I am having a single linear interaction, a one-to-one interaction with the App Store. So I download the app and I do things with that app. What the blockchain is doing is making that process more 3D so that I can see you've downloaded the app and you're having an interaction with it. But the app is only allowed to expose, or the blockchain can only expose what is considered to be non-private information, the information that would be available in the public domain anyway.
Okay.
Does that make a little bit more sense?
Yeah,
it's making the process a bit more 3D, basically.
Yeah. As I said, we are trying really to explain something complex in a simple word and also to provide some examples. But yeah, I think it's more secure. In terms of security, what I understood, as I said, it's decentralized. So it means that can we hack the system, or how is it working in terms of security?
Well, to be completely honest and to be completely transparent, anything that requires anything that uses technology can always be hacked. But there are mechanisms that get put in place with the blockchain, encryption, these kind of things, token mechanisms and blocks and things. So they limit. There's a lot of learning that's gone into putting blockchains together. So they limit how much how they basically minimize the risk. I mean, the best way to kind of demonstrate this is if you consider the App Store again. Banks was one of the late, one of the industries that came to the app stores last. You could say they came very, very late. I mean, we've had apps now since 2009, 2010, okay. And banking apps have only started to arrive in the last few years because they were incredibly concerned about. I mean, the risks are huge, right? So. But on the blockchain, you actually have banks that are jumping on the blockchain very, very early. They're actually driving the blockchain space very, very fast. So they clearly have a lot of trust in this mechanism. And so there's a lot of things that have been put in place. So, I mean, they're driving these industries forward.
But can you just, as you are talking about bank, so for me, the origin of blockchain, or the first time we heard about blockchain, was with cryptocurrency. So can you talk more about that?
So the blockchain actually came along with Bitcoin, which was the original cryptocurrency. And when they released they had I don't remember what the number is, but just to simplify it, let's say there was 100,000 Bitcoins that were available. Then you were able to see that this is how many Bitcoins are available, and then an entity over here, you wouldn't necessarily be able to see their name, but you'd be able to see an ID. You said this ID mined or purchased this many Bitcoins. So you could see that transaction on the ledger, which was on the blockchain. You were able to see it. You see.
Okay.
And then if they made a purchase of they bought something, you'd be able to see that these two entities, they had an interaction, and you could see there's a transaction that took place, but it doesn't expose who's behind that necessarily, unless the blockchain chooses to expose that information. But now cryptocurrency, that Bitcoin is a token, right? It's a token that is being issued within the blockchain. So the blockchains can choose to issue tokens. So you have like Ethereum, which is another cryptocurrency. It's a token that it issues, and then they have certain parameters. Some blockchains, I believe, don't even have cryptocurrencies. They just issue tokens, and then you can create your own cryptocurrency on top of it. I mean, you're just issuing tokens, basically. And a token is just a unit of measure.
Yeah. It's like when we are talking about euro or Swiss franc or this kind of thing. So it's mainly.
But it doesn't have to be. It doesn't have to be a cryptocurrency. It can just be like a unit of something.
Yeah.
Like just issuing tokens.
So from the Bitcoin, we arrive now we see that this technology can be used in many industries. So do you have some other examples of industries than banks maybe that are also using that, and for what?
So JP Morgan made a major announcement that they were introducing the blockchain, and they're launching their own cryptocurrency so that people will be able to transfer money. They can convert their dollars or their euros or their pounds into cryptocurrency, and then they can transfer money across the globe and things. Because the advantage with cryptocurrency is the money hasn't got to move the way it has to move through the banks. I mean, these are archaic systems. They were made decades ago, and so when I want to send money from the UK to the US, it can be quite it's got to convert from pounds into US, and then there's exchange rate, and there's all these things. But if you have a single cryptocurrency, and the blockchain is because the blockchain just sits on the internet, so then it's available to the world. So then I can, if I want to pay somebody in the US, let's say JP Morgan, I don't know what their cryptocurrency is called, but let's just assume it was just like a Bitcoin. I can just pay 5 Bitcoins to somebody in America, and that transaction takes place on the blockchain. I don't need all these intermediaries like the banks and PayPal and all this kind of stuff. It's just a very straightforward transaction, and so it's secure. And yeah.
So what was, if I can say, underground starts to be like mainstream. So we start to have that with banks that are well known. Yeah. And we start to before it was mentioned that cryptocurrency is like something that will never be maintained. People are losing money by that, and now they are getting more confidence on that. So now even banks are using that. But outside of banks, is there also some other industries that are using that?
Yeah. So what happened with cryptocurrency, it actually got a really bad reputation, and deservedly so, I would say, because you had all the Bitcoin price hikes and the Bitcoins going up and down, and then people are launching cryptocurrencies and people are losing the money in their wallet and all this other stuff taking place. But where blockchain has become really interesting is something called smart contracts. And what happens with a smart contract is that the blockchain almost becomes a broker in that transaction, right? So where normally, if I buy something from you, and like if I buy something on eBay, I buy something and then the item gets delivered to me. If I have a problem with the item, it's very difficult to prove whether I received the item, and it's very difficult for the seller to know where the fraud is where that fraud in that transaction is taking place. But with smart contracts, what happens is everything is verified. So the asset that is being sent to me. So let's say I'm buying a laptop. You would take a picture of the laptop. You would have all the specs and everything of the laptop, and that asset would get registered on the blockchain. So it's all verified, okay? And then when I buy that from you, I enter into a contract with you on the blockchain. It's a smart contract that I'm entering. And so that when that person ships that item and then I receive it, you can see the chain of that whole transaction that's taking place. So you can see everything that's happening. And so if there's some fraud that's taking place, either some foul play either on your side or on my part, it's all available to see within that public domain. You can see everything that's taking place. So it's very transparent. So with that, it minimizes the chance of fraud taking place. So that then creates a lot of acceleration, a huge amount of acceleration, because then I'm not waiting for eBay or Amazon or Uber or any of these big platform providers. I'm not waiting for them to be the trust broker in this process, because otherwise, normally I have to enter into a dispute. If I buy something with you on eBay, eBay then has to be the mediator, right? So then eBay then has to verify, did I receive the item, and then make an assessment, and then did you send the item to me? And then they make a decision. So both of us are at the whim and mercy of eBay. Whereas with the blockchain takes out the middleman, because all that information is, the blockchain becomes the middleman, but it's run by a machine. So there's no foul play there. There's no human error or human judgment taking place.
Okay, so as you said, it takes the place of the middleman. So it's like a computer that we can trust because of the security that we have. So, and everybody is connecting to that. So Amazon or eBay connecting to that. The transporter is connecting to that. The customer is connecting to that. So all the information is stored inside, and we cannot manipulate this information because, as we said, we have a block. So it means that from one is linked to the other, so we cannot manipulate without seeing that. It looks really interesting in terms also of contract. In
So
terms
the
of
point about I just want to elaborate a little bit on the point about the trust broker. So the advantage where the trust broker is a massive advantage if you have a decentralized blockchain is that if I was a taxi driver, for example, what I have to do is that I have to register with Uber to say I want to be a taxi driver, because nobody's going to see me driving on the street and say, oh, okay, I'm happy to jump in the car with you, take me to XYZ place, because it's just too dangerous for that to happen. Because there's no trust element there. So Uber then becomes the trust provider in that instant. So I then can go on Uber, I can see the reviews, and I can see that that Uber is this driver has good reviews and everything, and all that takes place. But with the blockchain, because the middleman is getting taken out, me as a taxi driver, I'm not then at Uber's mercy. So then I can start, then if Uber starts being tyrannical with me, starts taking more commission from me, or throws me off their system for some inane silly reason or whatever, I'm not. They can't wield that tyranny over me. So I can have a direct one-to-one transaction with the consumer. So that benefits me as a small player or a small provider, but it also benefits the consumer, because that's going to lower prices. It's going to lower the friction. It's friction that it lowers. Okay. And sometimes that translates as prices, but it can translate as time, all sorts of things. So in terms of the medical industry or any other industry, what it's likely to do is it has the potential to break the stronghold of the monopolies or the big corporations, where the small player can come in and accelerate the advance or the pace of technology. So when you're where we are in the medical industry right now, if there is a medical device that could come to the market much quicker, but those people are waiting for a corporate player to assess the technology, make a decision about it, run the trials, do all these things. That could take 3 years, 5 years, 7 years. Could take a very long time. But they might not have, that medical provider might not have the resource, the capital to make the investment into the marketing and the sales and all those kind of things to get that device out there into the public. But because of the blockchain, because this big corporate player, whoever that is, because they're no longer a middleman, the small medical device player can now have a conversation direct with the public, with the marketplace, so to speak, and therefore can bring that device to the market much faster without as much friction. Does that make sense?
You mean there is when you are talking specifically about this? So, for example, let's talk, as you mentioned, about small companies. Where what information can, for example, be provided to a blockchain? I mean, let's start again. So, who will be creating this blockchain that we are talking about as the middleman?
Well, blockchains at the moment are being created by any corporation or entity that has a huge amount of funds. So large corporations, JP Morgan, Goldman Sachs, these kind of companies. In the medical device industry, I haven't heard a big corporation working on it just yet, but I would assume somebody like General Electric, GE, would probably be taking this quite seriously, because whoever creates the blockchain, they're at a first mover advantage. I mean, generally, and there's always this thing about, first to market, first to mind. It's not actually that true generally in the industry, but in a situation like this, it can actually prove to be advantageous, because once you get everybody on your platform, then you're in control of that platform. But if it's completely decentralized, then at that stage it doesn't really matter. But somebody has to come along and invest a large amount of money for the long game to create a blockchain, because creating a blockchain is not cheap. It's very expensive because it's a public database. It's encrypted. You have to have what we call notarization. If I register myself on the blockchain, somebody has to be able to notarize my identity. And that generally can only be done by the state, by the government or by the state. So it requires a lot of, interaction with authoritative entities, right? So it's something that will be done by very big organizations. It's not going to be a small player that's going to create the blockchain, but a small player could create apps for the blockchain.
So we can have, for example, a big player that is deciding to create a blockchain, but this blockchain can propose this blockchain as a service to be used by a lot of other companies. So a lot of companies can connect to it, register information there, as you mentioned, without being connected with a big company or any other big player, they can all connect to the same blockchain to register informations there. Can we talk about, for example, as you mentioned about governments, as we have now currently the medical device industry, they are trying to build like a database called UDAMED, where all the manufacturers will register their products there. The governments will see which products are registered. The notified bodies will also have a look at some documents that should be inside. I mean, there will be a lot of players that will be connected to this database, which that we call UDAMED. So, do you think this is kind of a model that where we can use blockchain?
Yeah, definitely. I think that's where it's going to go, because if you have a healthcare provider, they need to be able to find manufacturers very, very quickly. They need to know we need this equipment to be able to provide our services. What equipment is good, what has passed all the trials, what's passed all the tests, what is really good. Normally, what you do is you then put a call out and you speak to a few people, and then they come in and you make assessments and all this kind of stuff. That thing takes a lot of time, and obviously in that time your healthcare provision could be suffering. But when you've got a public database and you have all this verification and the trust brokerage and all this thing in place, then it becomes really, really fast. It's like when you used to use the yellow pages to find somebody to like you want to fix your sink or something, because it's leaking. You go through the yellow pages and you try and make a few phone calls. You try and find somebody who can help you to fix your sink, but you don't know who's good and who's not. But then Google came along and created listings, and then they had reviews, and then it became a little bit easier to make a quick, you could make a quick call and make a decision. But that hasn't worked very well in a business-to-business space, right? In a B2B space. But with the blockchain, because there are regulatory requirements, all of that information, you need clinical trial assessment information, you need regulatory compliance information. There's all this other stuff that you need. But you can throw all of that into the blockchain, and then so the decision making can be data driven, and it can be very, very fast. It takes a lot of friction out of the process, which means the industry benefits as a whole.
Okay, and I was also imagining, so we have a lot of connections also between industries and some manufacturers or some suppliers. And as you mentioned, we have also the smart contracts. So we can also see this model between business to business to create contracts and to be sure that the contracts is signed and it's if I can say it exists.
Yeah, and it'll become a much faster process because you don't necessarily have to have. Normally when a contract is being signed, you got to go to a lawyer, and then there's a whole review process, and then it gets signed, and then what you can do is you can. Like the way that I work with my clients, for example, I have a set of agreements, the objectives, and then you have deliverables, and there's all these things that you have to do, right? But those parameters of what a consulting engagement entails, those parameters can be part of the blockchain, and the blockchain is managing that contract for you. That's why it's a smart contract. So it takes a lawyer out of the process. You'd still need lawyers to put the contract template together, as in the parameters of that smart contract. But then after that, they don't need to be involved at every stage of the process.
So we are mainly talking about databases. So it means that we are storing information there, information that is secured, that we can, if I can say, trust because of all the encryption and everything. That can be public, and that we can, within the parameters of the blockchain, we can see some aspects or some information or not. This can be also maybe interesting in terms of public health, where we are, if all the manufacturers or all the hospitals are putting information about some devices inside the blockchain, we can maybe get some statistics about the devices without knowing or without seeing the patients or without seeing the manufacturers or without seeing the thing. Is just to see, for example, how many patients do have a hip surgery, or how many patients did have this kind of disease, etc., and how many after putting a medical device were a bit better, or etc., etc. So this is also information as soon as I call it we did call that, I think, before the big data or something like that, where we had the big database of information.
The thing is, the possibilities are endless of what you could do with this. It's like trying to get somebody to predict how the internet was going to change the world before the internet came along. Some things were quite obvious, that people will be able to buy and sell online, that people will send emails to each other, people might be able to make phone calls across the world. But what wasn't obvious was the advent of YouTube, Facebook, Twitter, Instagram. The social media landscape that came along was I don't think anybody could have imagined that was going to happen. And then all of the advantages and disadvantages that brought with it. And that's where we are with blockchain right now. But some of the things that we're able to foresee right now is that the information that is being collected on cancer rates in the industry, in the society or in the country, or certain diseases and things, that data is being manually collected, or it's disparate, it's in lots of places. But when it's all in one place on the blockchain, then you can, if a medical device creator, rather than them taking a guess at what the market, it's like an intuitive guess as to what the market requires and where it's going to be of most impact. They can look at the data and know exactly what the market requires, because the data is all available. So you can grab that data and you can analyze it, right? So you can use big data techniques. I mean, big data is basically just data. It's just a lot of data that you then analyze. But you can analyze it and summarize, and you can see, okay, 25% of this country has cancer, and most of them are getting cancer at between 27 and 35 years of age, God forbid, but just for argument's sake.
Yeah.
But then you can say, let's create something. Let's either contact all those people before they get to 27 and bring them in for a checkup before they get to 27, because we know this is happening. Which, I mean, you can't do that. You can't preempt that at the moment in this day and age. It can't be preempted in the same way. Or you could say, okay, let's create something that deals with that onset of cancer before they get to 27. I mean, this is.
As you said, it's endless. Yeah. We have a lot of possibilities, and we can imagine a lot of scenarios for companies to do that. As you said, also it costs a lot of money. So for now, I think it's only big players that can really create that. But
the big players can create the blockchain, but they just like you have the App Store, you can create an app on the App Store that will be made available to everybody. So you can be a small player and create an app on the App Store that can then provide a particular, just the way an app provides a service on the App Store.
Yeah. Okay. So I think we saw the big picture of it. So we have now more to dig on the possibilities for people. So from your side, Khuram, so what can you do for people to help them, or if I can say on this area?
So if you have an organization at the moment, either if it's a healthcare provider or a medical device provider, if they want somebody to come in and say, okay, if they've got a set of funds, okay, we want to be able to, if they have a series of challenges, we want to be able to solve these challenges, then I can basically go in and say, okay, these challenges can be solved on the blockchain. I can tell them, the introduction of the blockchain, I can help them do an evaluation or a feasibility that, yes, these problems can be solved by the blockchain, and help them figure out how they can use technology to accelerate being able to solve those challenges, basically. So, I mean, that's basically how I work, on a case-to-case basis, really.
Good. So you can really go with those companies and help them to define their strategy, as you said, and to help them to move forward with this new technology. So it's something where we don't see really at the end where it will go. But I think we have already.
But I can definitely help them just just orient themselves and just position themselves correctly so that they're ready for when those technological changes take place, basically.
Yeah.
I mean, that's the most you can do at the moment.
Okay. So Khuram, so where can people follow you?
I think the best thing at the moment is still LinkedIn for now. So if people want to ask me any questions, I'm more than happy to answer questions. If the people want to inbox me directly, if they have a few questions or they have something that they want to run by me, I'm happy to answer. I'm happy to respond to inbox questions all day long. Or if they want to comment on this video, I'll obviously keep an eye on it, and I can respond to things. I'm sure there'll be more questions that people will have, and I'll do my best to respond. But LinkedIn for now is probably the best way to connect. I do have my obviously company website, which is stratagem.io, if people want to have a look at some of the services. But LinkedIn is the easiest way to get hold of me, really.
Good. I will put every link on the show notes so that people can go directly and check for that. Okay, Khuram. So thank you very much. And I hope that people will really move forward on this blockchain topic to learn more about it. Maybe not to create one, but just to know exactly what are the possibilities and to see if it's something that can help them on their business. Okay, Khuram. So thank you very much. And,
you're welcome.
I wish you really a nice day.
Okay. Au revoir.
Thank you. Au revoir.